All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. Glad you guys get to enjoy my crazy hair and everything. um, okay. So it's a new year, and um, I want to start this off with a new project, um, an ambitious project, obviously. Um, there's a lot of people that are already doing something similar. Those people are Cadell Lass with Philosophy Portal. There is Underground Theory, Johannes and his community, Justin Murphy, Justin Murphy and his community. A lot of people have begun a kind of intellectual community. Um, and in response, I want to start my own. I want to start my own intellectual, but I hesitate on the word intellectual community. Um, but I want to start this community of relatedness through intellectual endeavors. What does that mean? Um, a community fostered on intellectual endeavors alone risks becoming, in my opinion, an echo space solely for ideas that we already agree upon. But a community that's fostered on relatedness is something that, in my opinion, can possibly navigate or prevent certain communities or certain spaces from becoming echolocations, right? Just simply echoing what we already fervently agree upon. So, with that being said, I am ambitiously attempting, in some sense, to construct what this space might mean. Um, and there is a book called The Way of Man, um, and 10 Rungs by Martin Buber. The Way of Man from Martin Buber is a kind of ambiguous methodology to begin with oneself and then towards the community. I have That's my plan. I have intentions to cultivate a community to where people want to come in sort of in need of beginning with themselves and then branching out. I think a lot of people have, in some sense, successfully done this. Um, Cadell Last, my friend Davud Gusli, because he's always pushed me to sort of create and drive something forward. Um, we all may have different ambitions, different ideas, but again, the main point is that in order to prevent spaces that simply echo what is already being said, um, in some sense, we need more of these spaces that exist. Um, and so my aim is to kind of cultivate a space of relationship, is to do what Martin Buber himself set out to do. Um, and what does that look like? What does that actually look like, instead of me telling you the content of what we will learn or what we will attempt to learn together, or so on? The ambitious aim of Martin Buber was to meet people as they are. You meet me on my ground, I meet you on your ground. But there's something more severe about what Buber is asking of us when we are saying to meet each other on our ground and everything. Buber is asking that we shed all of our armor, all of our things that protect us typically, um, things that prevent us from meeting a person. And it's going to be this ironic movement where the very things that help us navigate and deal with other people are the very things that also prevent us from genuinely meeting people. Those sort of safeguarding mechanisms that we have come up with our behavior, behavior, with our behavior and our dialogue. We have come up with mechanisms, maybe even unconscious mechanisms, that prevent us from really meeting each other, from really seeing the other as other. So that is the task that my group I want to set out as doing. That obviously it's not going to be set on a type of intellectual bravado, right? And not a type of intellectual pride. Basically, what I'm saying is you don't have to be smart to join this group. And it's not about being smart to remain in this group. It's about how can we relate to anything in our lives that we struggle with, but also how can we relate to people that we don't understand. And maybe this community, we may all have a kind of openness to where it becomes easy for you to relate to each other. But I also want to set this community as a kind of starting space, a starting point for anybody else to relate to people in their own lives. So that means the confines of this space that I want to make doesn't have to remain as a kind of separation of your life. I believe in, and this is what Martin Buber was talking about too, and obviously is a very big influence on me, is this idea that we separate our spheres of life, right? There's my work life, here's my personal life, and then here's like my online life, and my intellectual life. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. And what does it mean to make those spheres of our lives talk to each other? What does it mean to live in that spirit of dialogue, of understanding what that means? So to kind of, and that's the set the tone. That's what I mean to set the tone for this group. That is the tone of the group. I will briefly read a little bit of the way the way of man sort of begins in its methodology, because this is what I intend for the group in itself. There is about 6 fundamental steps for Buber in the way of man, and that is the heart searching, the particular way, the resolution, beginning with oneself, not to be preoccupied with oneself, and here where one stands. Okay. All of these fundamental steps are necessary movements that are in some sense calling to get us to understand ourselves, know ourselves, begin with ourselves, and then progressively forget ourselves in a transformation process towards the community, towards people. So basically, and this is why I said it, this community is not about being smart. It's not about how smart you are. It's not how smart you already think you are. It's not about how little you know, how much you don't know, how maybe new people intimidate you. It's not about that. And I will do my best to give reminders of this when once more people kind of join in as well, right? I already have some people in the group, but they're people that I've already kind of known for a while. So this is the sort of invitation to people that need something, that they feel a need for something, a kind of community, but then also they're hesitant about the philosophical implications, meaning maybe they haven't read philosophy, maybe they don't have these kind of conversations on a daily basis. Maybe you might feel insecure or unconfident, and that's okay. It's okay to feel vulnerable, um, and I think that's the main point of what Buber is trying to express to us, is that relating to someone in a real way is, in some sense, the first step is releasing all those defense mechanisms that we have put in place and willing to be vulnerable to each other. That's the cost of relating. Um, and so, although this group will kind of go under a guise of intellectual exploration, right, and literature as well, right now I have set the ambition to what I call, I'm going to call this a phase of, we are in the phase of searching for God. And what does that mean? Now, again, this doesn't mean that you have to be Christian. This doesn't mean that you have to believe in God. You can take this in a more fundamental movement of what does it mean to search and to remain searching. Because when I say that the way this will begin is searching for God, that's for my own journey in some sense, but there's a way that you can read these literature, even though they have very heavy theological elements, maybe or maybe not. Um, it's about searching and that temptation to, once we feel that we have found something, to stop searching. But that ambition that I'm showing or wanting to show is that the searching always will continue, and that we will always be tempted to hold on, to grasp, to feel confident in what we have grasped. And so if you want to take it in a more metaphorical or allegorical kind of sense, um, searching for God is in some sense those idols of certainty that we want to feel comforted by and welcomed by, and they tempt us to stop searching. And so it's no coincidence that the first path is heart searching, and then the second path is the particular way, discovering our own particular way. And what does that mean? And that's also what I want to cultivate in this space. What does it mean to discover your own particular way? There's a lot of self-help around there. There's a lot of self-help gurus about, oh, let me help you discover your path, and I can point this group is not so much for that. This is more like a setting for yourself to discover that. But I have no advice to give other than my personal experience. So this is the only time where I will qualify openly that I don't have answers for the methodologies that we will be going through or the stages that I want the group to go through. Because in some sense, those are the communal aims, but those are up to the individuals themselves within the community that I want to foster here to set out for themselves What does that mean? What does that look like? What does it look like to find my own way, to follow my own path? And if we follow the way of man from Buber, finding your particular way is not an egoistic finding. You start with yourself. You explore that. You start with yourself so that way you can find a way. But you have to find your own way in the sense of how do you want to serve? How do you want to provide for the world, the community, everything else? That's stuff that you have to figure out on your own. But this community is exactly that kind of conversation space that I want to be there. Um, and we can foster this through the readings and reflections, right? Because I want you to think about with any reading, how does it relate to you? And if it's not apparent that it relates to you, really think about how can you make it address you. There, in the very first section of the Way of Man, and maybe I'm even thinking that maybe eventually the group should read this, The Way of Man itself, so we could set the communal intentions. I'll debate about that, but maybe I'll just do a series instead about my exposition on this methodology that Buber has pointed to us. Buber shares with us a story about a rabbi that's in jail, and another a Jewish guy comes up to him in jail and says, I just want you to answer this question, Rabbi. If you say that God is all-knowing, how come in the Bible God asked Adam, where are you? And this is the difference that I'm talking about. When we read text, how can we relate that to ourselves, and how can we get it to address us? The rabbi in this story does a very interesting move. Instead of giving a intellectual kind of robust argument back about how God didn't contradict himself when he asked Adam where he is, the rabbi turned the question on the questioner and said, Adam is no different from us. God is asking the same question to us. Where are you? And that's it. It's a question that directly addresses us versus an intellectual, abstract conversation. That's what I want this community to build itself on. How does it address us? How does it relate to you? How can it address you? Because this will involve thinking, fundamentally. It will involve thinking. How can something like this maybe hard reading or difficult reading, or maybe a reading that is literature, because we will read literature as well, how does that relate? How does it address us? And maybe the community itself can help also frame questions that address ourselves, or that we can address each other in these questions. So that is my aim for this group. Again, it's not about how brilliant you are. It's not about coming up with crazy metaphysical, philosophical systems or ideas. It's about coming up with questions and replies that address you and address others. And that's the community that I want to foster. And so in some sense, it is intellectually maybe heavy in terms of conversation or maybe reading, but the real aim is to foster a kind of addressment, a real addressing that needs to be happening. And I feel that's an addressing that is needed and it's missing in a lot of communities. I mean, it's very easy to lose your way. Intellectual pursuit is great, but you can lose your way. You can lose the fundamental aim very fast, very quickly. And it's something that I think a lot of people that genuinely start those spaces had previously intended for it to be a kind of community and relatedness, but it's very easy to lose your way. Um, and so, in some sense, the cultivation of my group is a response to that. Is a response. It's a response to renew that intention, to remind us of that intention, um, and so on. So, with that being said, um, if you are interested in joining, we will be meeting Wednesdays, every Wednesday, basically, 5 p.m. EST time, and we'll be reading Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor. And just to give a kind of example of what this book is about, this book is about a main character, Hazel Motes, who is struggling with his belief in God. In fact, he kind of fervently rejects his belief in God and wants to move on. But by this description, Flannery O'Connor gives us hints over the fact that maybe the main character can't really actually get rid of their belief in God. And what does that do in the process? With that violent process of us trying to get rid of something that is maybe impossible to get rid of. So whether you're atheist, Christian, non-religious, spiritual, whatever word we want to use, we can relate to this novel in terms of there's things that we believe that maybe we can't get rid of. And at the moment that we try to get rid of, it just does more violence and more harm. And it seems like the novel will question what is then the proper relation to this inescapable belief, this impossible belief to do away with. And if you feel like you're struggling something along with your own life, then I think the novel will be perfect for us to discuss. What does it do to people that realize that they can't give up? And maybe when we think about it, maybe it's not about giving up a specific belief, but about re-relating. We often think these two moments right here, beliefs that we can't give up, and relating as almost exclusion, as almost like exclusions, right? Like if I believe in God, it's given that I can't relate to the atheist, right? It's a given that I can't get along with him because he's a sinner and so on. Maybe not, right? We have to explore. Is it possible to hold something dear to you and relate to someone, meet someone who is different from you? In some sense, Hazel is struggling with himself, the main character. Someone who wants to give up on this, dispose of it completely. But is disposing always the answer? The way we typically would respond to another person would be like, let's just get rid of them. Let's just silence them, or let's completely eliminate them. What does that do? Does that solve anything? And what is the necessary violence for that to happen? What is, not only is there violence being done, but what does that violence do to us when we do it, when we decide to do it, when we decide to get rid of something other than us? So that's going to be a lot of the explorations, or some of the examples of that exploration that we can do with my this community that I want to foster. it's definitely an ambitious aim. Um, but something my partner asked me when I talked about what I felt the missing lack was, she definitely pushed this question of like, well, how do you think we will achieve that? I think the online space is one way that we can achieve that. And of course, it will take time. It will take patience. But if we are willing to search, and that is really all I ask, that would be the only value, that would be the only value that I would ask of this group, really, is are we willing to search and remain searching and remain to find our own way, our path, and then forget ourselves in service of the world, in service of the community? Are we willing to do that? Are we willing to remain searching and then eventually forgetting about that it was not about ourselves? But the problem is we must begin with ourselves. And that is the aim of this group. Um, and I'll try to do my best to guide sort of the fundamental principles that I'm laying down, because I think they're fundamental principles in the sense that they're open enough that anybody can accept and be willing to join, if they are willing to not be tempted, if we are willing to constantly fight off that temptation to secure something in its wholeness. Um, the only thing that Buber would say that we can secure is our turning, is our willingness to meet the other. And so that is my aim. That is my aim, for this group. That willingness, and searching is ingrained in that willingness, in my opinion. Because the moment we set up standards and values, they can obscure. But there are certain standards and values that we can remind ourselves that it's not about securing anything. It's about really being open, really being vulnerable, being open to a kind of spontaneity, a kind of trust, to be cultivated in all of this. So anyways, if you are willing to join, I have the link to my Patreon. It's not required to pay to participate in the book clubs. It's not required. Um, but if you want to be a part of the more deeper self-exploratory process, and what that means, then that will be my Patreon group, the membership, which is only $5, really. And I don't like asking for money, so I would look at it more like it's a donation. If you like joining the book clubs, if you start feeling like you like the community, then feel to donate and become a member, or donate for a month, or whatever it may be. It's I could literally care less about the money, but there are some real logistical finances that obviously that cost me money, right? And the fact that I have to take time to do all this stuff, and not to mention that even the video conferences or the video um, meetings, those Zoom and Google Meets, those require memberships and a certain monthly fee from me to be able to even hold the space and for the space to exist. So there are some finances that I have to pour into this dedication. But again, I am already willing to do this without any money without really any asking for money. But again, it's more like, if you feel like this is a community that you want to commit to and you like it, then feel free to donate and become a member. Because to me, it's about searching and ridding ourselves of that temptation to grasp once we feel like we have found something. And again, this central question of what does it mean to really relate, and reading material, not in an intellectual fashion, but in a sort of an addressment. How do we read something in a way that it addresses us? I feel like that will be the beginning of possible, I emphasize this word, possible, genuine meetings with new people, and in each other. So the way of man, that's where we'll begin, in terms of its communal movement. But Flannery O'Connor, Wise Blood, again, we will meet on the January 10th, Wednesday, 5 p.m. EST. I will put another post on the Patreon. I'll put it on Twitter. I want to divide this in 2 sessions. If you, yeah, the plan will be 2 sessions, but if you already read the book in first session, that's cool. That's good. Again, I'm totally open and flexible to how it's going to be done, but the plan is for 2 sessions. So if you want to just read half for the first session and then read the second half of the second session, that's fine. If you are able to read the first whole book through for the first session, that's great. We'll talk about it, and then maybe the next session you'll be able to go deeper on it with some people because they will also have read the rest of the book. So that will be the plan, and it's going to be every Wednesday, 5 p.m. EST for the book meetings. And then hopefully once we finish Flannery O'Connor, we'll go into another book, and it'll have similar themes. My question is for myself is, what does it mean to relate to God again for me? So it's a bit of a selfish ambition for me, but it doesn't have to be an isolating experience for you. But I would say this is the task of what I want to set for this community is, given that there are maybe seemingly things that we want to read or haven't read or would never entertain reading, given the community, if the community is there, how can it address us? How can things, something like Flannery O'Connor, and it's literature, so I feel like it's an easier way to find something to relate to, versus reading like a Heidegger Being in Time, right? Like this is a very intellectually heavy and demanding kind of process, but we're beginning with literature. And yes, the theme is God, the theme is Christianity in a sort of fiction setting, right? Novels. So you're not getting a kind of any like drill dogmatism or creeds, but also it's supposed to exemplify how these people live with these beliefs, how these people relate to other people with these beliefs, how do people relate with themselves with this belief. And I think Wise Blood is a great start for this. So the question that I will just leave as the fundamental motto of this group is a kind of calling, is where are you? And I'll leave it there. Where are you? So, all right. Thank you guys for watching, and I will soon update you guys more. You can join the Patreon page for free. I will always give out the announcements and everything else like that for free. But if you want a little bit more of an intimate communal searching for yourself, then the membership is there, because that's where I will share like more things about the ambitious aims of the way and the way of man from Buber and everything else. But all right, guys, thanks for watching. Take care.